Welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Podcast, hosted by CRM technology and sales process expert Christopher Smith, talking with sales leaders that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Listen to find out how the best of the best achieve success with their team and CRM technology. And remember, unless you are the lead dog, the view never changes.
Welcome to Sales Lead Dog. In this episode, I have joining me Bob Poznanovich. Bob, welcome to Sales Lead Dog.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
Bob, tell me a little about your current role in the organization you're working with today.
So today I'm in charge of growth, which in our organization has a couple different components to it. One is a sales organization that we call outreach.
Yep.
I'm in healthcare, so one of my teams isn't selling products and services as much as we're selling relationships and trust. So that's one team. The other team that I manage is a traditional sales organization that is selling products and services that we publish and we create a publishing division. Then I have what I would call the inside sales team, but often referred to as our front end in the healthcare space, which is the team of people who take the calls from patients and families who want help. I think it's very much a sales job, maybe even more difficult sales job. And then I've got, I connect the dots between product development and marketing. And I own, as far as area of responsibility, what we're calling OKRs, organizational key results, for admissions. So I'm kind of the senior exec that owns the roll-up, either my direct reports or others that impact our ability to serve our mission, which is to help more people. And typically that's in the area of serving more people from clinical or from a product perspective.
Yep. So Bob's current title is Chief Business Growth Officer at Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation. So I think everybody knows who that is. Prior to that, you were Vice President of Marketing and Business Development. Tell me a little bit about your evolution, or how you progressed from the VP role into this role as Chief Business Growth Officer.
Yeah, so I think all organizations, and particularly those in healthcare, where we've got a fixed number of beds, right? I'm not making any new beds, has a challenge as you look at inflation rising, look at the cost of doing business in general, that we're going to need, when you look at, like, just on salaries alone, 3 or 4% a year growth just to cover the reoccurring costs that are predictable, let alone the impact on inflation of the costs. So we needed to build a growth strategy that looked for three things. And I think this is the simplicity of kind of a growth strategy. It's sell more, sell to more, and sell for more, right? Wow. So in that capacity, I think what we missed as an organization was the funnel of leadership that would look at that and try to make that happen from organic growth. And that's kind of how it emerged, is as we look to emerging markets, changing political environment from clinical requirements and regulation to customer demand as it's evolving with COVID, is changing a lot. That we need to evolve our product line, and as the population shows up differently, sicker, with new drugs and with new challenges, that there's opportunities to take an entrepreneurial approach. I think if you look at it that way, to being innovative in the area of growth of selling to more, right? Which is looking at products and services that we don't have. So part of this vision was that we've got to create X number of millions of dollars in growth over the next year for products and services that don't exist, while we're also selling and maximize the capacity of what we currently have, and then looking for ways to get more value so we could sell for more.
That's fascinating. There's a lot for us to talk about today. Before we get to that, thinking back over your career, which, check out Bob's LinkedIn profile. It's pretty interesting to see his progression, his path to where he got to now. But looking back over your career, what are the three things that have driven your success?
So I would say what drove me overall was being money motivated. personal story is I didn't grow up with a lot of money. So the hope of money equal power, prestige, happiness. Right? I was going to be a lawyer. I couldn't quite get into law school at the time from financially. And I had some buddies who I was really impressed with. Just some guys that I not really mentors, but guys that I looked up to, maybe a year or so older than me, who went into sales. And they were all really what I would think, strong people that could have gone a lot of different ways. And that initial connotation of being in sales kind of didn't sit me right. But when I looked at these men doing that role and who they were and what they were doing, it changed my perspective. So I got into sales with the short-term hope of making enough money to go to law school. Well, then I ended up being really successful really fast in sales. So I was making the money, and then I realized it wasn't a bad path to leading people. So I guess number one was ambition, being motivated for money, which wasn't bad as a sales guy. The second contributing factor in my success, and maybe the first one, was my dedication to being really, really, really good at sales. There's the art and the science. And I've done a lot of work, not only perfecting the sales perspective, but also the buying perspective. I bet you with all the people you've had on the show, not many people talked about selling as a buyer as opposed to selling as a salesman.
No.
There is a psychological buying process that people go through when they're making a decision. I think we're too often in sales thinking about, the Miller-Hyman and whatever the 10 steps are that we're doing. And we often don't look at what the customer's going through their buying cycle, psychological.
Yep.
So it's much easier for me to sell somebody when I can understand where they're at using the psychology, at least the history of how this was studied, right, to help me understand people. And I think that leads to the third component was, when I always say this, it sounds egotistical, but I think that emotional intelligence is a big factor. And I think knowing how to fit in, knowing how to communicate with people, understand the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule. Instead of treat people like I want to be treated, treat people like they want to be treated.
Right.
Sometimes that's manipulative, and I recognize that. But I think people would say that have demonstrated really strong, emotional intelligence, that I could understand people, I could feel people, I could connect with people. Yep. In the sales world, if you could do that, then it helps you win the sales. And if there was a fourth one, you didn't ask for it is I've had a passion about the products and the industries I was in. Yeah. I sell things that I like. Maybe they didn't matter to everybody, but I believed in. It became better for me when I got really behind a product or an industry that I like to be able to be what I would say is that consultative sales rep, which was not only could provide solutions that you had or problems you had, but could I be good enough to know your business, your industry, and my product line to create problems and solutions that you didn't even know you had.
Yep.
And that market expertise or product expertise helped me do that.
That's awesome. So you answered one of my questions is, how'd you get into sales? But what I really want to know is so many people struggle when they get into sales because it's people going, well, I'll just go in and start selling, not realizing how hard it is. Yeah. You had early success. What was behind that early success?
I had a good mentor. Now I'm going to age myself by saying I went to work for what was the office products business back in the late 70s. That was a great place for people to learn how to sell. I mean, it was up and down the busy streets of downtown Chicago, selling copiers and word processing equipment. We carried them on big hospital carts, trying to give demos up and down the street. You learn how to prospect, you learn how to demo, you learn how to propose, you learn how to close. And every week, that the company that I worked for had every Wednesday night of sales training. It was, again, prospecting, closing, demoing, proposing. And that was it. Every week you did it. And you got really good at presenting products. You got really good at, prospecting. And of course you couldn't survive without closing. And I think in the simplicity of what we learned in those days, and it's a model I really try to follow. In the simplicity, salespeople only do three things. They prospect, they close, they take care of their current customers. And that's kind of how I built this core set of kind of behaviors or kind of my own sales DNA, which is I'm looking at all three things. Am I prospecting? Am I not closing because I don't have enough prospecting? It goes back to prospecting. And if I'm not getting good, taking care of my customers, I'm not going to get repeat business and referrals. That's kind of what I hold my sales teams today to, is to make sure they know that. And again, I think mentor was important. I had a really good mentor who was great at the basics. I had a company who was really forced us to be really good at the basics. And then I had a mentor, my first sales manager, who was great at sales training, motivating, recognizing, people like myself who had a willing to put the work in and gave us the opportunities.
Right. Did he lead from the front or did he lead from the back?
He was very, very much in the front. We were very much, today's what would be called micromanaged,
Right.
but we were very micromanaged. If you know the Miller-Heiman the 1 minute manager model, where you're get D1 to get told what to do, as opposed to getting support. We got told what to do for a lot. Now, over time, some people earned more, but we were really micromanaged. And there were some good disciplines. One of the organizations we worked with for him, we had payphones in the sales bullpen. They didn't want you sitting around sitting in the office on phone calls. So you want to make phone calls, get up, use the payphone, and hit the street. That kind of a discipline.
Right.
Today's world that probably doesn't fly, but in those days, it's the right tone, right? And again, in 1980, I walked in a sales organization, 78, and one of the people who was next to me was, as I was new, my first job out of college, was selling copiers, and she was making $100,000 a year in commission, and at 78.
Yeah, that's big money.
Yes, that was big money. Some people still talk about, I make $100,000 a year, but think about that's what they were making back in those days selling copiers. So, the environment was right. Some of the role models were right. Some of the mentors were right. And of course, I put the right work into.
Yeah. So what took you into the path of becoming a leader in sales?
Yeah. So what I guess being a boss and moving up the ladder became more attractive to me than just being in sales. I was also looking, in this big bullpen of guys that were 65 years old who were pushing copiers.
Right.
And I didn't want to be that guy either. Right. So I knew there was a couple paths up the corporate ladder, even though I didn't know what the corporate ladder was. One was through engineering. The other one was through, sales and marketing. And I thought, why not take the shot?
Yeah. Yep. Why do you think, what was it about you that stood out where they tapped you on the shoulder and said, Bob, we want you to take this next step? What were you demonstrating, or what were you doing to stand out from the rest of the people?
In sales, there's no secret. It was the numbers.
Okay.
I killed it. I was always number one salesman. I was just looking at it. We cleaned my office, and there's a bunch of awards I had. I was a salesman of the month, like for 3 or 4 years in a row. Every year when we had whatever award it was, salesman of the year, sales manager of the year, regional unit manager of the year, I was always number one. And in a lot of years, my goal was not only that we were the number one region, but every one of my people made quota. And there were years that I had a sales team sometimes over a couple hundred people that made quota. Not everybody, so I think it was the success record. I think it was also the fact that I was able to bring forward really good voice of the customer. And since I'm in Minnesota, I'll use a Minnesota analogy. We kind of had the ability, or I had the ability to be in front of people and listen good enough that I was able to kind of understand where the puck was going to be,
right?
Not where it was at. That gave product development, product management some opportunities. And we got involved in some creative go-to-market strategies because we could anticipate where things were probably going to go.
Yep. So thinking about that topic in today's market, how do you drive growth, especially in your current role now, where to me it's really interesting, as you were talking about your current organization, where, even though you're working in healthcare, which, a lot of people listening might think, well, how's that apply to me in my world? To me, I was thinking you're trying to maximize what you have, your current capacity. You got to maximize that. But then you also have to drive growth, because you can't just rely on that. If you maximize what you have today, as your costs are going up, that at some point you're going to hit a wall, right? So you have to find other revenue opportunities, new markets, new products, services that you can sell to your customer base. It's the same as every other business. So tell me about that from, this growth mindset to where you're making sure you're taking care of your customers and what you have today and maximizing that, but also providing opportunities to grow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I think if you're out there every day, right, and you're doing your job as far as being in front of people, and number one, you know your business, right, and you know your industry. I always try to set it up, you know, and I try to teach my teams this, that if you walk into a customer's office, right, and it's packed with your competitors, he was going to meet with everybody today, and he comes out and he goes, Bob, he said to the team, I could only meet with one of you today. Bob, come see me, right? I'd want that guy to recognize that I stood out because I bring value to the conversation, right? That I could add value. So if you're the person who could add value and you put yourself in the position that you could listen, right? That you're really listening to what's said, what's not being said, and that as you go on these sales calls, you can connect dots that you're starting to identify, right? And when you go to customer one, he goes, I got this problem. Go to customer two, I say, I got this problem. I can say to customer two, what about customer one's example, right? Like,
Right.
do you have that problem too, right? Now when I go see a third guy, I got three problems to tee up, right? His plus the previous two. And I can start this dialogue where I get smarter on every sales call. I get to see the patterns and opportunities exist. And then the question is, what do you do with it, right? And can I influence either the change in how I go to market? Do I change what I feature as my benefits and what products I highlight? Do I look for certain problems on their end? Or do I influence product development or product enhancement or operations to tweak the things to better meet the needs of the market? So that was kind of how I approached it in a lot of different fronts. When I started in the technology business, I started in 70, 80 when we got in the PC business. I was working directly with Microsoft, to develop things like the standard with how PCs worked in a multimedia environment. It was feedback from my customers who looked at the beginning of Apple where everything was installed. It came with the mouse and all the software was installed, compared to Windows where you got big boxes of software and you had to install them yourself. Yeah. So that's how my company was. Zenith at the time was Zenith. Zenith was a big company and their division was a $1 billion division called Zenith Data Systems. That's how we became the first PC manufacturer to pre-install Windows on a computer and bundle it with a mouse. So I could take that customer feedback that says, I really want the Windows environment, but I love the simplicity and the ease of the Apple environment. So that's how I think the field feedback could change how you package or present material. We didn't create new computers. We packaged the computers differently in ways that the consumers was meeting some of the consumer needs that could help me overcome some of the objections that my competition had.
Right. How do you create alignment within the organization towards growth? Because change is hard for everybody. It doesn't matter really what type of change, but how do you manage that in your role?
Yeah, I think the challenge with growth often, it comes down to corporate culture and the change mentality of an organization, right? I mean, how risk-bearing the organization is, what we have in the way of human resources and capital to make it happen. So for me, a little bit was to create the need for growth, to kind of have this conversation that we've got to grow, right? And there's some of the urgency around growth. It was to get alignment and some buy-in from some other leaders, right, that would see the same thing.
Yep.
And then it was to look for other people in the organization in that growth mindset who were willing to take a risk, was okay failing, right? Was okay putting in the extra work to get there, to get some wins, to get us credibility.
Right.
Right. And I've got examples of how, in this space, like I did back in the PC days, was able to see what the customers wanted, what the insurance companies were willing to pay for in the future, what patients needed, in their own recovery, and looked at ways that I could productize that in a way that customers would want it, the payers would pay for it, and our clinical staff believed in it. And we created, some product marketing there, product development that was new to us that today is worth $30-40 million in revenue. Another example was in 2018. Now, 2018 is significant because COVID didn't happen until 2020.
Right.
So in 2018, based upon the same scenario we talked about, which was needing growth, looking at the market, using logic, know where technology was going, knowing the realities of the funnel of patients and what's restricting the funnel from growing. I saw an opportunity in 2018 to say that virtual care could be a thing. Right now, we had regulatory challenges, we had investment risks, we had payers who weren't willing to pay for it. So the path through regulatory, the path through getting paid for the idea, was an obstacle. We had to create the clinical model. But in 2018, at the end of 2018, the beginning, all of 2019, we work with regulators, we work with payers, we got positioned to be unique in the marketplace. And I was getting ready to launch on March of 2020.
Oh my gosh.
March 23rd, actually, of 2020.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We were getting ready to launch our entire product line, which had completely first in the market. And a week before, they called the epidemic, and everybody got access to those regulations, and everybody got access to their payer. So I kind of felt on that day like the Pony Express did when they connected both ends of the telegraph, right?
Yeah.
I had the best drivers and the fastest horses. Now I'm out of business.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite that bad, but it would have been interesting to see where we would have been if we would have been, and the good news was, because of our test and our pilot, et cetera, I was able to transition 1,500 patients overnight, over 5 days, from facility-based care to virtual care. We shut down our buildings.
Right.
But some of the competitive advantage I had disappeared. But I think that was a good example of being ahead of the curve from a product development perspective, but just not working out because of some the competitive marketplace changed. But today, even though the industry kind of caught up, we lost some of our competitive nature. 47% of our patients are access to care that way.
Right.
So, it didn't explode as big as it could have,
Right.
and uniquely as it could have, but it still became significant to our growth. And I think that's a combination. That's the reality of the sales team being a voice of what's going on closest to the customer.
Right.
And lots of customers, right? Lots of different types of customers to paint that picture.
Yep.
Okay.
I've talked with many CEOs where I'll ask them, tell me your strategic goals for the year. And almost always, number one is, we want to grow revenue. And then I ask the question, how? What's your plan to actually grow revenue? More often than not, I don't really get an answer, or at least the answer they give me isn't really real. It's like, well, I set the goal, we're going to grow 30%. As someone in your role, if someone came to you, if your CEO came to you and said, hey, Bob, I want to grow 20% revenue next year or the next 2 years, whatever that is, without really anything to back that up, how do you manage those expectations, or how do you, in your role, how do you suggest people manage something like that?
Yeah. I think when you have a big problem like that, I try to reduce it to the smallest, smaller buckets, right? Like I said, simplest, and it would even be smaller than this, but I use the term SWOT. Like, what can I SWOT? SWOT is sell what's available today, right? What do I got that I could sell more of, right?
Right. I love that.
And what is my capacity, right? And what are my underserved markets? And that real basic of, what do I got that's on the shelf that I need to sell more of? And the other thing is, what do I maybe have on the shelf that I'm not selling, that I could sell to new types of customers, right? So new market expansion.
Right.
And then on top of that is what we could do from a new product development perspective. And then that third bucket is not only how can I sell more, but is there opportunities to bundle, to change some of the ways that we're presenting products? For example, one of our publishing decisions, we used to sell you a product. We moved to a licensing model, right? Mm-hmm. So now we've got reoccurring revenue. We're not starting from zero every year. Right. So some of it was changing the models. So I think that's kind of one is saying, well, what can I do, right? I mean, what can we do, and what's realistic? And we've had these conversations over the years. It's like, I want this kind of growth, right? Well, yeah, we all would, right? But what's the plan to get there, and what is realistic? Because I don't think anybody wants to overpromise and underproduce.
Right.
But we don't want to set the bar so low that we don't strive to do more too, right?
Right.
So I think it's that balance about, okay, here's a goal. Can we get there? If not, what can we get to? And I think that will help. That will help us, kind of set realistic goals and get aligned within the organization how to get there.
Right.
And then, of course, it trickles down. You got the right people in the right place doing the right thing.
Yeah. How do you deal with people that are maybe stuck in the mud or just really aren't interested in growth? That they, for whatever reason, they're just not getting on board. How do you manage those people?
If it's my team, it's one answer.
I love, that's my answer too.
Yeah. Sometimes you pat them high and sometimes you pat them low. I think it becomes a little bit of a challenge when it's not your team.
Right.
And I think part of that is to sell the dream, right? And you've got to recognize that no matter if you're selling internally or externally, people are motivated by their motives, not by mine.
Right.
And I think it's a little bit of that exercise to find out what their goals are and how my growth strategies will help them. The good news is I've got, an opportunity because of what we do, work we do, and the important work we do is that we're saving lives.
Right.
So everybody that works here is here because of mission, right? Anybody in sales could make more selling something else, it didn't matter. And the front end works hard and healthcare is difficult, but we're here for the ultimate reason, which is the customer. I think sometimes reminding them that this is about the customer, not about us.
Yeah.
This is about the patient, right? Or the family. It helps us, address this on a different level.
Yeah. What's the hardest thing about your current job?
So I think in sales, in general, people would say, who's your number one competitor in sales? Right? People always say, who's your biggest competitor? I think in any sales job, no matter what you're selling, your biggest competitor is always willingness to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was Joe Blow, you could fix the product up to go against Joe Blow, right? If it's the lowest price guy, it's always going to be the lowest price guy. So I doubt that that's always the answer, right? But when I would sell, for example, an IBM compatible computer, and I go knock on an IT door, right? And I say, I give you a computer that's faster, cheaper, great brand, which is Zenith. That's even more compatible to your own equipment is to your own equipment. How many do you want? And they'd say, Bob, I don't want any. Right? I would say, how could that be? You got the budget, you got the need, you got, he said, I'm not buying anything but IBM.
Right.
I don't have no willingness to change.
Right.
And part of that because it's worked and it's not that incremental. So I would always tell my salespeople, incremental to you as a sales guy, right? As a new customer, incremental to you isn't always incremental to your customer, right? It's changed. It's hard to change, right? It's not safe. Nobody ever got fired from buying IBM back in those days,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting back to my current job, my biggest problem, I'm dealing with the disease with this mental health and substance use disorders, where the underlying problem of the disease is denial that I'm sick and often the reluctance to get help. So willingness to change is my biggest challenge, is people call us, but the conversion is really low compared to their need and the urgency, because on some level, most people don't really want to quit or change.
Right.
And that's hard to do. And when I talk about the front end staff that works for me, I think about the hardest sales job in the world and the hardest buy in the world too. So together, and again, the word sales is used kind of in a clinical guideline, but we're asking our patients and our families, most likely in crisis, because they didn't wake up today and say the world is great, I need mental health help, right? Or the world is great, my cocaine addiction is, the cops are thrilled, my employer's thrilled, right? It happened because something went wrong. And they find us however they find us, right? Some may know the brand, some may find us on Google, don't know. And they call us and say, I got a problem. Often they're not convinced they really have a problem. But even when they are, we're asking them to make a decision that's a healthcare decision. That is probably a decision they've never made before in their life. They probably don't know anybody who's made a similar decision they could go to for ask for help. If they did, they're not talking about it.
Yeah.
And then we're asking them to make this decision with the same sick mind that got them into the problem, somehow being healthy enough to get them out of the problem.
Right.
And we're asking them to make this decision sight unseen over the phone on blind faith in the middle of crisis. So more people say no, that they don't, not now, than say, yes, I need help. And it's not that they don't all need help. We can figure out what's the right place. It's just that mind is in a position where they don't want to get better.
Right.
And that's the part that challenges our staff emotionally when you hear really sad stories. So, it's different than selling a computer up and down the street that nobody really cares about. Like one more computer in the world is not going to make a difference. But when you're dealing with a family who's making bad decisions, who's putting family members at risk,
Yep.
It becomes much more personal, becomes much more important. and it becomes much more frustrating. And, and my team that does that job doesn't want to be called sales, but I don't look at sales as a bad connotation.
Right.
I mean, if I don't sell them, right, which really means convince them they've got a problem, that we've got the right product and we're the right place.
Yep.
Somebody else might, or worst case, they do nothing.
Yep.
And there is some things that we could do better, or with the things that we could do from a pure science perspective to engage them differently. We have different outcomes by people. So not everybody does the same results. So clearly there's a human factor on how well I connect with you versus somebody else might connect with you.
Right.
So that's kind of the science and the art that I'm trying to overcome is how do we engage with people in ways that will allow them to get help more, whether it's with us or somebody else, right? If we're not right, who can I get them to that can help them?
Yep.
And I think we have to look at things like how we're training the people, our salespeople. I mean, our care navigators. What tools do we give them? What are we doing about the science of the resistance to change for individuals? I think we're looking at technology and new product development that says, if you're not willing to do this, what would you be willing to do? And I think there's some feedback that we need to, again, where that puck is going to be.
Yep.
Use that feedback in that all these hundreds of thousands of calls to say they're not going to be willing to do this, but they might be willing to do that.
Yep.
And that makes good business and good margin. I mean, it's good mission and margin.
Yep.
Right? If I could help you get help, that's a start. And if I can make a few bucks in the process, that's not bad either, because it helps me continue to exist so I can help more people.
Yep.
Right. There's no cash, no margin, there's no mission.
Yep.
Right? So I think that's the biggest challenge. I just hang up sometimes and just say, God, how is that okay?
Yeah.
Like, how is it okay for this family to walk away, right, in this situation?
Wow.
And like I said, it's frustrating when you lose a deal.
Yeah.
You're somebody who needs medical help, right? If you lose a deal selling a computer, so what?
Yeah.
I mean, it helps on a big scope. Society isn't impacted, right?
Right. Stakes are very real in your world. Very real. It's, my world, one of the things when I'm talking to people, I'm trying to figure out, is there an external pressure, something that's forcing them to change? Because my experience is, unless that exists, they're not going to change. They're going to stay right where they're at. And so I'm always trying to figure that out. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking like, yeah, your team is doing the same thing, but it's so much more important and so much more impactful, but it just gets down to the like you were saying earlier, the science behind it and what that buyer is going through. You have to understand that and live in their shoes, and in their mind to be able to influence that decision.
Yeah, and your point about finding that pain point, right? It really applies to the substance use and mental health. But I think in any sales environment, it's what is the need, right? What's the motivator to get over that incremental, right? Change is hard, but what's the upside, right?
Right.
And I try to tell my teams, the need isn't treatment, right? We often think of the need as the product, right? That isn't the need, right? The need is to not die.
Yeah.
The need is to save their family.
Yeah.
The solution is treatment. And the place is Hazelton, but the need isn't you need treatment. Yeah, you might need treatment as a solution, but what you really need to do is to stop losing things in your addiction. You got to start getting things back.
Right.
Right. You did not die.
Yeah.
Right? You make sure that your kid doesn't die in the bed next, downstairs because you're afraid to take action. Right. I mean, that's what people are really afraid of. In my space, which is a real challenge too, is getting off topic about sales, but knowing what the customer is going through is navigating care.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So, again, how about the whole buying process of, not knowing how to buy this, never buying it, don't know anybody who's bought. How do you make the right decision, end up at the right place to get you the care you need from somebody who's legitimate?
Yep.
And that adds, a whole other dimension to the complexity of what we do. And that act of listening is so important by the team to find that leverage point. Like, where is that opening where I can have change conversation? Where can I use a clinical process, an evidence-based clinical process, not sales training, but clinical process, which is motivational interviewing? How do I try to talk to this person in a conversation that continues to give them that motivation?
Right. Holy cow. Wow. Bob, how are you guys as an organization leveraging technology to support your growth plans?
Yeah.
Is that something that's working well for you guys? Or do you struggle with that?
We struggle. We a couple of reasons we struggle. Number one is as a nonprofit,
Yeah.
you've got limited capital. So making innovation using technology and innovation technology, I can't go out and float some new stock or bring in some new investors or add AI to something I'm doing and get 100 times the valuation, right, of something. So number one is just availability of capital and the fight for capital, right, between buildings and patient care and investment. I think others is part of it was some of the vision on where we're going to get, and our tech stack needed to be improved. So little by little we make new tech stack. We made a major investment that took a lot of capital and time to put a new electronic health record, which is important to serve our patients and our staff. We added a CRM, which had to connect to that to create a front end tool for the people, help people get in the door, and the people who like my sales teams who are supporting those relationships. We're not yet where we need to be, but I can tell you the path of where we want to go and where I see some things that are interesting. So one of the technologies we did take advantage of, obviously, was video conferencing, as we're doing now, right? That's mainstream. I can provide care that way. Not really innovating anymore, but that becomes an important tool. You say, what's next? I think we need to look at delivering care differently and using portable devices like my watch and my iPhone as a way of gathering data too. Collecting this passive data to help us better understand how to improve patient outcomes. And that becomes really important. If I could provide better outcomes, I could tell a better story, I could ask for more money.
Yep.
Right. So how do we use technology? I know there's emerging technology with AI through voice recognition that can provide feedback on how well a counselor is doing to establish their therapeutic lines. I could use feedback on a voice activated call to say predictively if they're depressed or anxiety in 3 minutes on the phone call.
Yeah.
So are there emerging technologies that can make my staff better, more effective? That maybe I could help drive patients down a pathway that's more fit for them. So an example I use is we have two types of callers. Those who are shopping, right, trying to problem solve, and those that are ready to buy. They've done their research, they're ready to check out, right? They're ready to check in. How do I make those engagements so they get to the right people that can do that right job? Because connecting with somebody who's helping you do a mission is much different than helping you solve a problem.
Yeah.
How do I use AI and patient pathways in the patient journey digitally to do that? So, we need to invest in more AI. We need to invest in more personalization of healthcare. So the tools that allow us to personalize care, to personalize the initiative, to deliver care personalized, to use real feedback from wearables, I think is the next area. I think to get past some of this denial, can I give people some more tools available when they want them, where they want them, how they want them, that they can access their own use? Can we put tools in place that says, here's some real feedback that might help you recognize.
Yep.
So I think that we're going to have to rely on technology more to get there. I don't think healthcare or behavioral health in general has been very creative and innovative. I think providers like hospitals and treatment providers like us aren't the great innovators. We rely on some partners to do that, and there's just not a lot of innovation going on for behavioral health and substance use. But I think there's an opportunity to look at how we deliver care, not to the small percentage of people who come to Hazelton Betty Ford, but to those who are struggling, who aren't able to get there. And there's some health equity issues in that too. And then to anybody who got care, got help, however they got help, how do we continue to help them? And I'm looking at, again, mission and margin, right? What is the product development areas there that can provide really good value with to help them continue? So I think I got to look, but I got to deliver that through technology.
Yeah.
Because it's got to scale. Right?
Yep. It's got to be affordable too. Some of that technology, it's still very expensive right now.
Right. It's, so we got to research to make sure it works. We got to tweak it.
Yep.
And I remember a few years ago, the sales team out there were like, I actually cold called Tim Cook at Apple, and I got through not to Tim, but to his COO.
Yeah.
And I made a pitch that you guys take on really important social issues, and what's greater than addiction and the opiate epidemic?
Yeah.
I got their attention, in my letter,
Yeah.
my follow-up. And they said, great, we're going to put you in charge of the health team. We're going to endorse this. I wasn't quite in a position to say what I wanted to do yet.
Right.
Like I was hoping Apple would tell me what to do. They were like, you tell me what to do, we'll help you build it. So we weren't quite there yet. But I think those kind of relationships is where I'd like to get with technologies. We're not a technology company.
Yeah.
We need to learn how to do partnerships, which is another area of growth that we don't have today, but that our brand, our credibility, and our knowledge puts us up there to be a potential partner. So I think you'll see technology playing a bigger role in healthcare. And I hope that we get there through the partnerships, which is another sales and business development opportunity to tee those up.
Bob, that's awesome. That's fascinating. I wish we could talk more. If we're at that time now, we got to wrap things down. If people want to reach out, connect with you, they want to learn more about your mission or just learn more about you and maybe even be part of your team, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is a real easy way. And if you want to provide my work email, you can do that too, whatever works with you. But I'm very accessible on LinkedIn. I accept I respond to all the messages, and I accept all the friendship requests.
Yep.
That'd be a place to start. And then if there was something that made sense, we could connect off of there.
Awesome. And we'll share this information in the show notes for this episode. You can check that out at impellercrm.com/sales lead dog. You'll get not only this episode, but all our other episodes of Sales Lead Dog. So be sure to check that out. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. This really, I seriously, you're one of those guests. I think I could keep talking for 2 more hours with you. It's absolutely fascinating to listen to you and your journey. There's so much knowledge in your head that I would love to just peel away and put into mine.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I think anytime that I could get, the message out there more about what we do, I think the importance of sales in the process too. That's great because again, I think that in some world, my team is really important to what we do, and no matter what you're doing, what you're selling, that a really important sales team.
Yeah,
that's that first face of the organization.
Yep.
It's such an important role. So
it really is. Yeah. So thanks again for coming on Sales Lead Dog, and welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Pack.
Thank you. Good luck to you and your mission.
Thank you.
As we end this discussion on Sales Lead Dog, be sure to subscribe to catch all our episodes. On social media, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Watch the videos on YouTube, and you can also find our episodes on our website at impellercrm.com/Sales Lead Dog. Sales Lead Dog is supported by Impeller CRM, delivering objectively better CRM for business, guaranteed.